Snow fell silently across the Ardennes. In the frozen stillness of winter 1944, American tank crews faced a nightmare. From the distance came the low thunder of engines. German Panthers and King Tigers advanced with a confidence born from invincibility. Time after time, American shells bounced harmlessly from their armor. Crews burned inside Shermans. Entire units withdrew, unable to face the iron tide. Fear ruled the battlefield. And then, almost overnight, something changed. A new silhouette emerged from the tree line, its turret larger than any seen before. Inside, a crew gripped the controls of a weapon whispered about in camps, a promise spoken in hushed tones. The breech locked. The command was given. One thunderous shot echoed through the snow. Flames burst from a panther. For the first time, the hunters had become the hunted. Stay with us, because this is not just another story of tanks and battles. This is the forgotten chapter of World War II. It is the story of the M36 Jackson, the tank destroyer that turned fear into defiance. By 1942, the battlefields of Europe had changed forever. German armor grew stronger with every campaign. The Tiger and Panther shrugged off hits that once destroyed Panzer IIIs and IVs. American crews, fighting with Shermans and M10 destroyers, realized their weapons could no longer pierce the enemy's front armor. Reports from Italy and Normandy told of units decimated, morale shattered. Something had to be done. The answer came not in a brand new design, but in a daring transformation. A gun built to strike bombers from the skies would be reborn to strike tanks from the earth. It was America's gamble, and it would carry the name M36 Jackson. The German army no longer relied solely on the speed of blitzkrieg. Instead, it fielded machines that seemed unstoppable. The Tiger, with its thick vertical armor, and the Panther, with its deadly sloped glacis, terrified every opponent. For American crews, these tanks were nightmares made real. The Sherman tank, armed with a 75mm gun, could do little more than scratch the paint of a Panther from the front. The M10 tank destroyer, fitted with a 3-inch gun, fared no better. Shells ricocheted. Panthers pressed forward. Tigers shrugged off direct hits. Crews perished inside burning vehicles, leaving survivors shaken and commanders desperate. The United States had entered the war with a unique doctrine. Unlike the Germans, who built tanks to fight other tanks, American planners believed tanks were meant to support infantry, exploit breakthroughs, and overwhelm through mobility. To face enemy armor, the Americans created a separate branch, the Tank Destroyer Force. Its creed was speed, flexibility, and precision. Tank destroyers were meant to ambush, strike from concealment, and vanish before the enemy could return fire. In North Africa, this doctrine seemed to work. The M3 gun motor carriage, little more than a half-track carrying a 75mm gun, ambushed lighter German panzers effectively. Then came the M10, built on the reliable Sherman chassis, but mounting a more powerful 3-inch gun. For a time, American crews felt confident. Its open turret gave visibility. Its sloped armor offered some protection. Its gun could pierce the Panzer IV. But war evolves quickly. When the Panther appeared in 1943, the battlefield shifted overnight. Its frontal armor rendered the 3-inch gun obsolete. Its 75mm high-velocity cannon tore through American tanks at long range. Facing Tigers was even worse. Crews nicknamed their weapons pea shooters in bitter mockery. Morale sank. Confidence wavered. Commanders understood a new weapon was needed, not just an incremental upgrade, but a leap in firepower. American engineers looked to an unlikely source, the 90mm anti-aircraft gun. Designed to hurl shells skyward at enemy bombers, it possessed devastating velocity. Adapted for ground combat, it promised accuracy, range, and raw penetration. The transformation was swift. The original M1 anti-aircraft gun became the M2, redesigned to allow depression angles for ground fire. Soon came the M3, a dual-purpose gun tailored for armored vehicles. At 1,000 yards, tests showed it could pierce 9 inches of armor, enough to trouble even a Tiger. At last, America had a weapon that could meet Germany's best head-on. But a gun, no matter how powerful, required a mount. To save time, engineers turned to what they already had. The M10's hull, dependable and widely available, would form the foundation. On top, a new turret was cast, large, rounded, and sloped, with a massive mantlet to absorb recoil. The turret remained open-topped, a compromise to save weight and provide visibility, though it left crews exposed to weather and shrapnel. A counterweight bustle at the rear balanced the long barrel and doubled as ammunition storage for 11 rounds. Inside, for the first time, a power traverse allowed the gunner to swing the heavy cannon with speed and precision. From this urgency, the M36 Jackson was born. Variants followed quickly. The standard M36, mounted on gasoline-powered M10A1 hulls. The M36B1, combining the new turret with the sturdier Sherman M4A3 hull. And the M36B2, built on diesel-powered M10 hulls, adapting to whatever resources were available. Every version carried the same defining feature, the 90mm gun. Comparisons with other weapons underscored its significance. The British 17-pounder, deadly in its own right, scattered shots more widely at range. The German long 88, mounted on King Tigers, remained formidable, but in controlled tests, the American gun sometimes surpassed it in accuracy. For the first time, American crews could believe their shots would not be wasted. The M36 weighed 31 tons, driven by a 5 to 100 horsepower V8 engine, capable of 26 miles per hour. It was not a heavy tank, nor was it meant to be. It was a hunter designed for distance, precision, and survival. Every detail, from its counterweight bustle to its muzzle brake, spoke of urgency. This was not a stopgap. It was the culmination of America's tank destroyer doctrine, forged under the pressure of defeat and desperation. By mid-1944, the M36 Jackson was ready for battle. It carried with it not just steel and firepower, but the hope of crews who had seen too many friends fall. For them, this was more than a machine. It was a promise that the nightmare of Panther and Tiger could be faced and defeated. The summer of 1944 saw the first M36 Jacksons arrive in Europe. They came quietly. Only a handful rushed from American factories to tank destroyer battalions fighting through France. At first, their presence went unnoticed by the enemy. But for the men who climbed into their steel hulls, the difference was immediate. After years of watching shells bounce off German armor, they now gripped the controls of a weapon that could strike back. In the hedgerows of Normandy and the villages of Lorraine, the M36 faced its first trials. Crews discovered its strengths and its flaws. With standard armor-piercing rounds, it could knock out a Panther at ranges that once seemed impossible. When issued the scarce high-velocity ammunition HVAP shells, they guarded each round like gold, saving them for the moment when a Tiger or King Tiger appeared. The open turret, however, exposed them to rain, snow, and shrapnel. Gunners crouched beneath canvas covers or welded plates of scrap steel to shield themselves. The machine gave them power, but demanded courage. By late 1944, only 6 tank destroyer battalions had been equipped with the new vehicle. Most others still fought in outdated M10s or thin-skinned M18 Hellcats. Yet wherever the M36 appeared, the battlefield shifted. German crews, once supremely confident, began to treat the long silhouette of the 90mm gun with wary respect. Panthers that had dominated the countryside found themselves suddenly vulnerable. For American infantry pinned down in shattered villages, the thunderous crack of a Jackson firing became the sound of salvation. Still, the true trial by fire had yet to come. In December of 1944, the German army launched its last great gamble, the Ardennes offensive, remembered forever as the Battle of the Bulge. Snow blanketed the forests, fog clung to valleys. From the trees poured tigers, panthers, and the dreaded King Tigers. Entire American lines reeled under the assault. Infantrymen fought desperately to hold crossroads and bridges, knowing that armored behemoths bore down upon them. At Saint Vith, a vital crossroads town, American units made their stand. Among them were crews of the 7th Armored Division with their newly issued M36s. Concealed behind hedgerows and shattered buildings, they waited. A Panther appeared first, its cannon scanning the streets, confident in its invulnerability. The order was given. A 90mm shell tore across the snow, smashing into its turret. Fire burst from the hatch. The hunter was destroyed. For the first time in the Ardennes, the Germans felt the sting of a weapon they had not expected. As the battle raged, stories of remarkable shots spread through the ranks. Corporal Pinto, manning his Jackson, engaged a Panther nearly 4,000 yards away, so distant it seemed impossible. He fired. Seconds later, the German tank erupted. It was one of the longest recorded kills of the war. Not long after, Lieutenant Alfred Rose matched the feat, destroying another Panther at over 4 kilometers, the very limit of the M36's optics. Such moments, whispered from foxhole to foxhole, lifted morale when it was needed most. Yet the Jackson was not invincible. Reports from the 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion told of duels with King Tigers. Even the 90mm gun could not pierce their frontal armor. Shots at close range deflected harmlessly. To survive, M36 crews adapted. They waited for flanking shots, aiming at thinner side plates or the vulnerable turret. At Freilinghoven, a Jackson of the 702nd Battalion did exactly that. Holding fire until a King Tiger exposed its flank, the crew let loose a single round. The monster collapsed in flames. Through snowstorms, artillery barrages, and sudden ambushes, the M36 fought with ferocity. Its crews, often outnumbered and exposed, destroyed more than 300 German tanks during the campaign. The Jackson proved itself not by sheer invulnerability, but by precision, power, and the courage of the men inside. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, the legend of the M36 was sealed. It was no longer just a machine of steel and fire. It was the weapon that helped blunt Germany's last great offensive. When the tide of the Bulge finally turned and American forces regained the initiative, the Jackson stood at the center of the story. It was proof that even in the darkest winter, the balance of power could shift with a single machine. And yet, its lessons were sobering. The M36 could defeat a Panther at range, but not always a Tiger II from the front. Crews learned that survival depended on skill, patience, and terrain. They fought with discipline, not blind aggression. They understood that the Jackson was a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. And wielded with care, it was devastating. By the close of 1944, the M36 had done what it was built to do. It had restored balance to the battlefield, given American soldiers the confidence to stand, and shown the German army that its armored beasts were no longer untouchable. The High Command took notice. Reports praised its accuracy, its ability to change the course of engagements, and its effect on morale. For a force that had once fought with pea shooters, the arrival of the Jackson was nothing less than a miracle. When the smoke of the Ardennes finally cleared, the battlefield told a story of destruction and resilience. Twisted hulks of German armor lay scattered across snow-covered fields and shattered villages. Tank destroyer battalions, wielding M18 Hellcats and the new M36 Jacksons, claimed more than 300 German tanks destroyed. For the infantry who had faced Tigers and Panthers head-on, the sight of wrecked German machines brought relief and renewed hope. The M36 had proven itself indispensable, yet its limitations were clear. Reports from the front showed that even with its 90mm gun, the Jackson struggled against the frontal armor of the King Tiger. Crews learned to adapt. They waited patiently, using terrain for cover. They aimed for the thinner side plates, the exposed turret, or the vulnerable tracks. In these moments, skill and discipline mattered as much as steel. The Jackson was not brute force. It was precision, guided by experience. Comparisons with other Allied and enemy weapons underscored its place. The British 17-pounder, mounted on the Firefly Sherman, could also slay Tigers, but it scattered shots more widely at long range. The German Long 88, mounted on the fearsome King Tiger, remained deadly, yet the American 90mm often matched or surpassed it in accuracy. In skilled hands, the Jackson gave American crews a weapon that could face Germany's best on equal terms. As the Allies surged across the Rhine in early 1945, The M36 continued to serve in critical battles. German villages defended by armor were reduced to rubble under its fire. Roads once dominated by Panthers were reclaimed, yet production never reached the urgency of earlier war years. By January, only 6 battalions were fully equipped. The rest fought with outdated M10s, still relying on tactics rather than firepower. The arrival of the M26 Pershing, itself carrying the same 90mm gun, offered a glimpse of the future. The Pershing was a true heavy tank, combining firepower with armor protection, and it began to overshadow the Jackson. But for the men who fought through the Ardennes, the Jackson's place was secure. It was remembered as the weapon that gave them a fighting chance. They recalled bitter winter nights in open turrets, snow falling onto their shoulders as they gripped the breech. They remembered the thunderous recoil that shook their bones, and the moment when a Panther erupted in flames under their fire. In those memories, the M36 was not just a machine, it was a lifeline. When victory came in May 1945, the Jackson stood as the final expression of America's tank destroyer doctrine. Born from desperation, it had arrived late, in small numbers, but it had fulfilled its purpose. In the darkest days of the war, it had turned the tide against armored giants. The broader story of Tranthé Jackson II cannot be told without it. In the immediate aftermath, the U.S. Army rethought its armored philosophy. The tank destroyer force, once seen as essential, was dissolved. Its mission folded into the new generation of main battle tanks. The Pershing, sharing the same 90mm gun, symbolized this transition. Yet even as doctrine shifted, the Jackson continued to serve. It replaced aging M10s in frontline units, and wherever it appeared, it was respected. The post-war years gave the Jackson a second life. No longer needed in American formations, it was distributed to allies through military assistance. France, Belgium, and Italy received them to rebuild their shattered armies. South Korea fielded them in desperate battles of the Korean War, where once again the 90mm cannon proved deadly against Soviet-built armor. Turkey, Iran, and Pakistan operated them for decades, upgrading as needed. Most remarkably, in the 1990s, long after jet fighters ruled the skies and composite armor protected modern tanks, the M36 fought once more. In the wars of Yugoslavia, 50 years after its birth, Jacksons rumbled through ruined towns, their guns firing in anger. Few machines of Tranthé Jackson II could claim such longevity. The Jackson's survival into the modern era was not an accident. It was a testament to a design that balanced mobility with raw firepower, a weapon that could be maintained, adapted, and trusted across generations. Its open turret had exposed its crews. Its armor had never matched the heavy tanks it faced, yet its gun, the 90mm gun, remained a force to be feared. In the end, that was its true legacy. Not invulnerability, but the ability to give men the chance to fight back, to stand their ground, and to believe that even giants could fall. When the guns of Europe finally fell silent in May 1945, the M36 Jackson stood as more than just another vehicle on the roster. It was the culmination of America's tank destroyer doctrine, a machine born in desperation but remembered in triumph. It had entered the battlefield late, in small numbers, yet its impact was far larger than its presence. In the Ardennes, it gave American soldiers the courage to hold. Across the Rhine, it opened roads once thought impassable. In its long barrel and thunderous recoil, it carried not only steel, but also the promise of survival. The Jackson was not as iconic as the Sherman, nor as feared as the Tiger. It was never produced in the millions, and it never dominated every battlefield. But it answered the question that haunted American crews in the darkest days: how do you stop the unstoppable? For those who fought inside it, the M36 was the answer. It turned fear into defiance, and despair into determination. Its legacy stretched far beyond World War II. In Korea, it fought Soviet-built armor with deadly precision. In the Middle East, it served allies for decades. Astonishingly, in the 1990s, Jacksons still fired in the wars of Yugoslavia, half a century after their birth. Few machines of war could claim such endurance. That longevity was not an accident, it was proof of balance, adaptability, and a design that met the needs of soldiers generation after generation. Today, preserved in museums and memorials, the M36 Jackson still commands attention. Visitors pause before its long 90mm gun, imagining the winter of 1944 when the tide of battle shifted because of weapons like this. Its silhouette tells a story of courage, sacrifice, and innovation. It is a reminder that in World War II, victory was never inevitable. It was earned through resilience, through innovation, and through the belief that freedom was worth every risk. For those who seek justice, independence, and peace, the Jackson story remains a symbol. It teaches us that even in the darkest winter, the balance of power can shift with a single decision, a single weapon, a single act of defiance. If this story touched something in your heart, do not let it fade. Share it, speak it, carry it forward. Because the lessons of World War II are not only history, they are warnings for the future and promises that freedom, once fought for, must never be surrendered.